We've had training camp. We've seen multiple preseason games for pretty much every single one of these rookies. So I want to say this will be the most up-to-date and most accurate rookie rankings list you can find. Starting off, Bijan Robinson 1, nothing's changed, right? I mean, yeah, we got to see him look very impressive in a preseason game for the Atlanta Falcons, but he was number 1 earlier this offseason. He was number 1 last offseason. He was number 1 the year before that. I mean, this is a running back that we've known how good of a prospect he was since he was a true freshman at the University of Texas. If we go back and look at every running back we've graded since 2014, the only rookie running back to grade out higher than Bijan Robinson in our metric model has been Saquon Barkley. Now, Leonard Fournette had the same score. Fournette was a great prospect, but I kind of want to say that Bijan Robinson is even more impressive just given the fact that for a running back to be drafted inside the top 10 picks of the NFL draft back in 2017, that meant a lot less than for it to happen in 2023 without NFL teams have completely changed how they value these running backs. I mean, love Bijan. I went to Texas. Hook 'em horns, saw him at the gym a couple weeks back, and we interviewed him at the draft, so I will be very biased with this ranking, but I'm pretty sure nobody's going to argue to have him here at 1. Now, our next guy will be Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson already announced as the starting quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts. Now, what's very interesting is to see the redraft expectations that you have with Richardson, because we know, I mean, how these players perform year 1, how many fantasy points they put up, that is going to have a dramatic impact on how their dynasty fantasy football value changes 12 months from now. And if you look at underdog drafts currently, Anthony Richardson is going as a top 12 quarterback. Anthony Richardson is going as a borderline top 10 QB just for 2023 leaks. And what we really have to ask ourselves is, if Anthony Richardson is a low-end quarterback 1 in fantasy this year, just based off his rushing upside, where is he valued in dynasty startup drafts next season? I mean, pretty much a locked and loaded round 1 startup pick if that happens, right? I mean, go back and look at what we just saw with Justin Fields. Justin Fields was elite in fantasy football based off the rushing upside. Justin Fields earned the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft by having the worst passing offense we've seen over the past decade. But does it matter? No, because the rushing upside and the fantasy points indicate that he has to be a round 1 startup selection. So I think you may see the same thing with Richardson. Now, our next guy, we will be looking at Bryce Young. With Young, I mean, this is another quarterback that's going to start year 1 now. Of course, the expectations from a redraft perspective are a little bit different. Bryce Young's quarterback 26 on underdog in comparison to Anthony Richardson, QB 11. Now, the reason being is with Bryce Young, you don't have the cheat code of the rushing upside, right? Bryce Young's going to have to develop, and he's going to have to be a good NFL quarterback for him to be able to put up fantasy points, which I truly do believe that he can in the long term. And what you really just need to see is any sign of competence for Bryce Young this season for him to continue to move up dynasty startup drafts next year. Now, dropping down to our next tier, we are going to have Jahmyr Gibbs at 4. With Jahmyr Gibbs, the expectations have continued to rise with reports that we've had out of Detroit. On top of this, with what we've seen in the preseason from Gibbs. Right now, Jahmyr Gibbs is going as the running back 10 in underdog best ball drafts. So if he is a low-end RB1 in fantasy, think about how he will be valued next offseason, knowing that he was the number 14 pick in the NFL draft, knowing that he's running behind an elite offensive line, knowing that he's incredibly young. I hate to say it, and I tweeted this out about a month ago, and I'm sure all of y'all on flockfantasy.com already saw. But once we had the Jonathan Taylor news, once we had Dalvin going over to the Jets, I looked around, I went, okay, Jahmyr Gibbs kind of has to be the running back 2 overall in Dynasty. This guy's not only the running back 2 in these rookie rankings, but you can't put CMC over him due to age. You can't put Taylor over him due to situation. You can't put Hall over him due to the production you'll see this next season. Yeah, so, I mean, Gibbs is elite at this point in Dynasty. Now, going over to our next guy, we will have CJ Stroud. Stroud hasn't looked great in the preseason, but who the hell cares, right? I mean, with Stroud, I'd imagine that he is actually going to probably struggle early on in his NFL career. And I'm not going to blame the guy, right? If you think about it, he went to Ohio State, had a better offensive line than pretty much any defensive line he had to go up against. He also had JSN, Marvin Harrison Jr., Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave. He had everybody to throw to in that offense. And now you go to the Houston Texans, where your offensive line isn't great. You don't really have any solid weapons. So, I mean, it's going to be a long process for Stroud in the NFL. I think you're probably not excited about starting him at all this year. Right now, he's going as the quarterback 29 in underdog drafts. Obviously, a long-term play. Now, our next guy will be Jackson Smith-Njigba. With JSN, this is a wide receiver that has the highest score we have ever had in our wide receiver prospect model. He scores as a 42, and the only other guys close to this include Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Garrett Wilson, Amari Cooper, Sammy Watkins, Calvin Ridley. Every single one of them hit in the NFL. Now, I understand Sammy Watkins didn't have a great late career, but at one point, Sammy Watkins was a round 1 Dynasty startup pick in 2015. So don't tell me Sammy Watkins didn't hit. With JSN, the reason that he grades here is if you look at his production with context, the man went out there as the wide receiver 1 alongside Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave at a younger age in that Ohio State offense. So I'm all in on JSN. I mean, I was at the very beginning of the process, and I truly believe he can be the wide receiver 1 overall for the Seattle Seahawks by the time we get to the end of the year. Now, dropping down to our next tier, we're going to have Johnston and Addison back to back. Now, I understand, yes, the redraft expectations are a lot higher for Jordan Addison than Quentin Johnston. Johnston is the wide receiver 41 on Underdog, whereas Jordan Addison is the wide receiver 37. I mean, but if we're talking about their prospect profiles, they do look very similar. I mean, both guys break out as true freshmen. You'll love to see it. Both guys dominate as true sophomores. You'll love to see it. Both guys declare as true juniors. You'll love to see it. And both guys go round 1 in the NFL draft. You love to see it. Those are all the boxes that we look checked. The reason Addison gets a small knock is just given the fact that Jordan Addison's a little bit on the slider side. And if you look at historical data, you kind of have to be a speedster if you're going to go out there and be elite at such a light weight at the wide receiver position. Of course, with the way that the NFL is now, he probably can overcome this, and it's probably not the biggest deal in the world, but it is going to knock him just a bit. And more so looking at the long-term situation, long-term, easily Quentin Johnston has better quarterback play with Justin Herbert. And long-term, Quentin Johnston has significantly less target competition. Addison's going to be dealing with Jefferson and Hawkinson for years. Quentin Johnston maybe has 1 more year. Keenan Allen, 1 to 2 more years of Mike Williams. I mean, Keenan's going into year 10 this season. So I think Quentin Johnston is the wide receiver 1 for the Chargers starting in 2024. So even if I'd rather have Addison for this season, I'm going to go Johnston for the long term. But of course, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to draft any of these guys for this season, we are drafting every single day Underdog Fantasy drafts on the Flock Fantasy YouTube channel. I mean, they are best ball drafts, so no time commitment at all during the year. So I drafted 700 teams to win $150,000 last year on Underdog. And if you sign up with promo code FLOCK, they're going to match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to 100. Plus, you'll get our 2023 fantasy football rankings, our 2023 Dynasty Fantasy Football rankings, a free trial to flockfantasy.com, and I work my butt off to get y'all an exclusive Josh Allen pick'em line for week 1 that's only going to be available for users who use promo code FLOCK. And I actually got y'all 3 of those this season only for Flock users. Now, going over to our next guy that we are going to be looking at will be Zay Flowers at 9. With Flowers, reports are he's looked great in training camp. He looks like the wide receiver 1 in Baltimore, and that's how he's being drafted as of today. Obviously, long-term, you really don't know what you have with Rashad Bateman. I mean, really looks like it's just this season for Odell Beckham Jr. Now, the reason I'm not going to be as high on Flowers as we are with those other guys declared early. I mean, we know if we look at historical analysis, you want those wide receivers coming out after their true junior season. If you look at the range of outcomes for Zay Flowers, there are a couple guys that obviously don't comp to him 1 for 1 in terms of playing style, but if you're looking at the best case in terms of NFL success, you have guys like Will Fuller, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jahan Dotson, DK Metcalf, Mike Williams in this range, but you also have some big time misses, right? You have Rondale Moore, you have John Ross, you have Jalen Strong, you have Terrace Marshall in this prospect score as well. Now, our next guy will be Zach Charbonnet. Charbonnet, phenomenal prospect. Not worried about that in the slightest. It's more so the situation. Kenneth Walker's still on a rookie deal. I believe Zach Charbonnet is going to be involved as a pass catcher early on. I think this is maybe going to be a 60-40 split in favor of Kenneth Walker, where you're kind of viewing Zach Charbonnet in the same light of A.J. Dillon, right? Where with Dillon, you can start him with the healthy Aaron Jones. You're never going to be excited about it, but you can get by. But what you're very excited about is the hidden handcuff appeal of if Kenneth Walker were to go down, then at that point, Zach Charbonnet with his 3-down profile looks like he could be a league winner for your Dynasty League. Now, going over to Dalton Cade at 11, I have been very reluctant to rank rookie tight ends this high. I know everybody's been all in on Dalton Cade. We've looked at the historical data. We've said, you know what? You're probably better off trading the pick for Bad Frymuth, which I still do stand by that. But I mean, if you look at year one expectations that people have with Kincaid right now, he's being drafted as the tight end 11 in underdog drafts. Don't necessarily agree with that, but I mean, obviously you're drafting him for the long term here. And everybody always says when they take a rookie tight end, I'm drafting him for the long term. I'm not expecting anything this year. I'm not going to sell him. But you really need to understand that if you're taking Dalton Cade, you're drafting him for the long term. And for the love of God, don't sell him when he's worth less in Dynasty Leagues next offseason. Now, dropping down to our next guy, we're going to go Will Levis at 12. And reports out of training camp have said that Levis doesn't look great. I'm sure y'all have seen the viral clips of Levis just, not doing well in footwork drills. In reality, I don't want to take too much away from that. Levis is just an upside shot just in case anything were to happen, right? He does have rushing upside. I actually really do want to root for him because he gave us a phenomenal interview at the NFL draft. And it's by no means a spot where Ryan Tannehill is guaranteed to be the starter here the next 3 years. Now, our next guy will be Marvin Mims, who is probably the biggest riser that we've had on this list since we last recorded. And the reason being, Tim Patrick, torn Achilles, out for the year. KJ Hamler, uncertain role with this team going forward. So if you are looking at Marvin Mims, he may actually get on the field this season. He may actually contribute. And if you look at the long term, we really don't know what the role is going to be for like Courtland Sutton. We don't really know what it's going to be for Jerry Jeudy. And in the case of Mims, he graded out in a pretty strong range. He was right next to Zay Flowers. The reason being is he broke out as a true freshman. He was pretty good as a true sophomore, declared as a true junior. Now, the reason he's not super exciting, right, is he didn't really get better ever. I mean, he was really good as a true freshman at OU, and then you didn't see the continued improvement, which you wanted to, but still kind of in the same place as Zay Flowers, and definitely a much better prospect than when you have with guys like Josh Downs, Jaden Reed, Rashid Rice, and the likes. But our next guy will be Devon Achane. Devon Achane dealing with the shoulder injury, going to be missing a couple weeks. Obviously not the biggest deal in the world from a dynasty perspective, but what I'm a little bit worried about is just this delaying him actually getting on the football field, and more importantly, possibly opening the window for the Miami Dolphins to go through and grab a passing down back, whether that's Kareem Hunt or Leonard Fournette, which could completely stall his year one. So yeah, hopefully Achane's back soon. The main thing that I'm concerned about, especially if you look at our running back prospect scores, is he's just so damn small that it's almost impossible to find an example over the past 10 years that found success in fantasy football. Now, going over to our next guy, we will have Rashid Rice. Rice, not that great of a prospect. If you look at our historical comps, pretty much best case scenario has been Sterling Shepard for Rashid Rice. But the reason I'm putting him here is he has an okay shot at being the wide receiver one for Patrick Mahomes. The other guys in this offense, Kadarius Toney, Sky Moore, they were all invested into with a second-round NFL draft pick. But Rashid Rice is the most recent example, and he has not given us any indication of him actually failing at the NFL level, such as Sky Moore. Now, dropping down to our next tier, I'm going to go Jonathan Mingo at 16. Now, I want to be on record. I do not think Jonathan Mingo is that great of a prospect. I think that people severely overrate Jonathan Mingo, and especially before and around the NFL draft time. But I've thought long and hard about it. And the reason why I'm putting Mingo here at 16, even if, say, a player like Josh Downs is actually better in our prospect model, is if we go through a hypothetical scenario here, right, where Jonathan Mingo and Josh Downs are both low-end wide receiver threes in fantasy this next season. They both flash some, but they both finish as the wide receiver 30 from a points per game perspective. Who is worth more in dynasty leagues next year? Based on the hype that you've had surrounding Jonathan Mingo, based off most likely next offseason, the departure of Adam Thielen and DJ Chark, at that point, you would assume that people would be severely overhyping Jonathan Mingo, and you would possibly have a sell high moment for him. So I will have Mingo here, just understanding the dynamic of your Dynasty Fantasy Football League, where these guys may have their value 12 months from now, and how we may be able to capitalize on said value. Now, our next guy will be Michael Mayer, 17. Mayer's a great prospect. I actually thought Michael Mayer was a better prospect than Dalton Cade. I mean, this was the guy that was on the radar for a while for everybody. Now, the issue is you probably have no production this year, right? And as we always say, yeah, you want to be thinking long-term in Dynasty, but at the end of the day, if you're going to take him just for all of a sudden him to fall from being a mid-second round pick to only being worth a third next offseason, does it even make sense drafting him in your rookie draft? You can just wait an offseason, take a swing on one of these running backs and try to trade for him next year. Now, our next guy will be Kareem Miller at 18. With Miller, I think it's pretty bad news that Kamara is only suspended 3 weeks, because now if you look at the short to immediate term, I mean, with Miller, it's going to be very hard for him to make an impact year one. And I still think that he's fine. I mean, if you look at him in our prospect model, it's a running back that actually grades out higher than an option like Devon Achane. There you have some guys like Miles Sanders, Carlos Hyde, David Montgomery, Alexander Madison that you can comp him to. I just don't love the situation that he's stepping into. And obviously with these running backs, you kind of have to be taking into account their situation, even in Dynasty Fantasy Football, more so than the wide receivers. But now our next guy will be Tank Bigsby. Bigsby should get on the field right away. He should see about a 30% split in this Jacksonville Jaguars offense. Now, the issue goes back to what you had with like Zach Charbonnet, right? Where Travis Etienne's still on his rookie deal. It's not like they're moving on from Travis Etienne anytime soon. So you're kind of stuck in a scenario where, yeah, I mean, if you're desperate, you're going to be able to play him over the next few years, but you're just more so drafting a handcuff just in case anything were to happen to Travis Etienne. And then at that point, you can be very excited about Bigsby. Now, our next player will be Roshan Johnson. Looks like Khalil Herbert has definitely taken this job for year one, right? Now, of course, long-term, we don't necessarily think that Khalil Herbert's the solidified answer there. I still actually have Roshan ranked ahead of Khalil Herbert from a dynasty perspective. Still love the talent profile. But if you're looking at these day three running backs, and I know it sucks that we keep talking about their immediate opportunity, but it matters so much. A big mistake dynasty players have is they go through and they think an option that was drafted in round 4, in round 3, in round 5 of the NFL draft is just going to get their shot when the guy in front of them leaves. But more times than not, if that guy was drafted in round 4 and they don't get an opportunity early on, by the time that other guy's out the door, such as Khalil Herbert, the Chicago Bears may be bringing in another RB. Now, of course, hook 'em horns. You know I love my guy Roshan Johnson, but we do have to be very realistic here with these rankings. Now, our next guy will be Josh Downs at 21. The expectations for Josh Downs are so minimal this next season, where he is being drafted as the wide receiver 93 from a points per game perspective on Underdog. 93. Now, trust me, I am taking him there every single day of the week. He's one of my most drafted guys on Underdog over the past month. I mean, if you compare him to someone like Jonathan Mingo, Mingo's going wide receiver 67. Night and day difference. Now, my issue with Josh Downs is I just think with how little hype that he has, even if I like him as a prospect, even if we look at our model and say, okay, yeah, he has a bunch of different things working for him. He declares as a junior, he's dominant as a sophomore. I mean, that's what we want to see. In reality, even if he were to go out there and be a wide receiver 3 in fantasy, this season, he's probably not going to help you out much. Based off this little amount of hype, I doubt people are going to be so excited to trade for him next offseason. So even if I like the guy, I have to be realistic about the range of outcomes and what you could possibly be moving him for next year. Now, our next player will be Jaden Reed. With Reed, similar to Downs from a prospect profile perspective, and really just massive question marks with Jordan Love, right? Now, the difference between Josh Downs and Jaden Reed in my mind, even if they're about the same as prospects, will be the fact that at least with Downs, you don't know the long-term certainty of Michael Pittman Jr. and if he can be a dominant alpha for the Indianapolis Colts 2 years from now. Whereas I'm pretty damn confident that Christian Watson is going to be that dominant player for the Green Bay Packers in 2025. So why we're going to have Reed down just a little bit further. Now, our next guy will be Taja Spears, 23. With Spears, he is good at everything, great at nothing. I mean, if we look at him in our running back prospect model, he's kind of in the range of the long shot players, right? Where he's right alongside Tank Bigsby, Izzy, Roshan Johnson, Chase Brown. Really, you're hoping that he turns into Marlon Mack. You're hoping that somehow he can be a player like Jordan Howard. The absolute best case scenario, what we've seen since 2014 in this range, has been Ramondre Stevenson. I think you have someone you can't start unless Derrick Henry goes down. And if Derrick Henry goes down, he's still probably only a low-end RB2. Now, our next guy will be Jaylen Hayes at 24. With Hyatt, I think he's going to be a good NFL wide receiver. I think his speed is going to bring a vertical threat that the New York Giants very much need. And I think he will be able to create space underneath for the other wide receivers to create separation and generate targets. But very similar to what we said with Jameson Williams last offseason, these guys that are stretching NFL defenses, they're just not as valuable in fantasy football, given the fact that they're not getting a ton of target volume. Now, our last guy will be Sam Laporta, and I think Laporta is actually going to be better than Michael Mayer this season. But if we're just going long-term here, I don't like Sam Laporta as much as a talent And I think in the long term, you're going to be dealing with the Monroe St. Brown taking so many of those targets close to the line of scrimmage, as well as Jahmyr Gibbs. Whereas Michael Mayer 2 years from now probably don't have Devontae Adams in Vegas anymore. And we really don't have to worry about a Jahmyr Gibbs type player being attached to him as well. But I think that's all we have for you in this video. Of course, thank you so much for checking it out. If you enjoyed it, go down there, drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you play Dynasty Fantasy Football. And if you want to get all of my Dynasty Fantasy Football rankings or hop into a draft with us, which we're doing every single night, go sign up for Underdog Fantasy. Use promo code FLOCK and they'll match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. Plus, you'll get our 2023 Dynasty Fantasy Football rankings, a free trial to flockfantasy.com. And I worked my butt off to get y'all the Josh Allen special pick'em, more than less than half a passing yard against the Jets week 1. Make sure you're taking advantage of that. I got y'all multiple special pick'ems to take advantage of this season. But thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Really do appreciate you. And really hope that I get to see you in a draft on the Flock Fantasy YouTube channel sometime soon.